Welcome to the Floor Academy podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Hadeen, former installation contract and boutique store owner. Every week on Floor Academy, we are offering flooring professionals a lifestyle lift through our business education that's focused on what you need to be doing behind the desk in order to move your company forward to be more efficient, more profitable, free up your time, as opposed to only focusing on the skilled trade. It's not that the skilled trade aspect is not important, but I already know you're really good at that and where to get that information. This is something that I found wasn't readily available, and I wanted to start having these discussions every Wednesday. A new episode comes out. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave a comment, get engaged, help grow that community so that you can continue to expand your mind and work with others to figure out how you can move your business forward to get to the things that you actually want to be doing, which I know is not driving around all day doing bids, running crews. You know, we want to be able to spend that time with our family, maybe go on that fishing trip. What is it that gets you really excited? Why'd you start your company? What was your why? And let's get you to that, because I know it's hard to get there and actually do the thing that you want to do. This week, I've got Doug Howard with me of Growth Team Strategies. Doug is a graduate of Wharton School of Business. He previously owned a small business consulting company for 17 years with offices in Alabama, Arizona, Virginia, and Maryland. And he is known for his entertaining yet informative approach to business ideas and strategies. He likes to bring complex business concepts into clarity with real life stories and recognizable examples. We had a great discussion coming up to the podcast, and it was full of wonderful stories. I like that he breaks everything down into essentially he's got his parables, man. He's out there talking like Jesus is, and breaking it down in easy to understand stories, which makes it a lot easier. And when you're dealing with complex subjects, right? Like how can I have it so that I can understand? I think hopefully I do the same thing. I aspire to be doing that. So he's now focused with Growth Team Strategies as a consulting company that specializes in growth planning, succession planning, and business improvement. While we won't be talking about succession planning today, I think that is something that is absolutely huge, and legacy companies that are trying to hand it off to a grandson or a son, there's family involved. It's something that's often overlooked until too close to the end, and it leads to a lot of problems. It's something that needs to start 5-10 years before somebody wants to exit. So if that's you and you're looking to do it, after this, you might want to give Doug a call, but we'll dig into that in just a second. We got a quick word from Cronus Flooring Business Manager. If you're struggling to keep your schedule, forgetting to follow up with clients, or your books behind, Cronus Flooring Business Manager has solutions that you are looking for. Streamline your life, gain more freedom, and maintain control of your business. From scheduling to follow-up reminders, integration with QuickBooks, and producing quotes quickly, you can say goodbye to your business headaches. Visit cronosoft.com/academy today to schedule your demo for this all-in-one approach for flooring business organization. That's KRONUSSOFT.com/academy. Cronus, fast relief for your flooring business headaches. Don't forget, if you didn't catch the link, it is in the show notes and you can grab it there. Doug, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. Mike Somedine, if you are out there listening, thanks for setting this up. I very much appreciate it. Doug, who are you? What do you do? And why do you do it?
Yeah, Kyle. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I love that Cronus branding, by the way. I thought that was really, really cool. I'll shout out to Mike too. Mike was actually the person that first made the impression on me that people are much taller in person than they are on Zoom. And I couldn't get over it when I first met him. And it was a funny conversation. But yeah, so I have a company called Growth Team Strategies. We do business consulting, primarily for people that have started a business because of their passion. They've started a business because of something they're really, really good at and they love to do. And as they've been successful at it, and it's grown into more of a business operation, they're dealing with the business challenges, the challenges of growth, the things that get in the way of growth.
Hmm.
But really, this is not what they went into business for. They went into business because they love to build, or they love to design, or they love to landscape, or whatever it is. And so we really love being sort of the business behind the passion, so that they can get more time and resource to do what they want to do. I've always been self-employed for the most part. Wasn't really designed for corporate America. And I grew up in an entrepreneurial household,
Hmm.
but I also had the experience at a very young age of a dad that was really, really good at the business he was in. He was a landscape architect and landscaper, and owned a garden center business, and we grew it. But Dad was great at what he was passionate at. Business was not his thing. Insurance, money, those kinds of things. When I was about 13 years old, we lost the business at the behest of the blizzard of '78 and some things that started to kind of cascade from there. And I think that's when I really started to realize that you can be really, really good at what you do,
Hmm.
but to get a business to go along with it is a really, really big challenge. And so I didn't set out with that as my mission, but I think it's kind of been an underlying message to all the positions I've had and the things that I like to do.
Yeah, no, I think all of that's really important. That actually ties in. I forgot to give an intro of what we're even going to talk about this episode. I apologize, folks. What we're going to dig into is that you don't have to do it all. And I think that's the trap that a lot of entrepreneurs, young business owners, or not even young, but just startups run into, is that you are the owner operator, you're that one man band, and you think I think a lot of us think that when you go out on your own, all I have to do is be really good at the skill. I just have to be able to install flooring. I just have to be able to install tile. I just have to be able to bake my cupcakes, and then people are going to buy them. And that's not the case. And you learn very quickly that there's marketing and advertising and your books to get done. And someone has to do the taxes at the end of the year. There's 15, 20, 30, 40 other hats that need to be worn. And all of a sudden you find yourself trying to be 40 different employees. And you may not equate it to that at first, but that's what's happening. And then how do you start managing that? And how do you get out of it? And I think, a lot of people are like, I can't trust anybody. I have to do it. No one's going to care like I do. I'm sorry, but I'm going to call bullshit on all of it, because we wouldn't have the examples of the like Fortune 500 companies around if that was the case.
Right.
You may not get we all know that if we go to a box store, we're probably not going to get great customer service, right? There's some things that lack in a larger business, but we don't have to get that big, right? We just need to be slightly bigger to free up our time and allow things to happen. But recognizing that and overcoming the mindset to get there is really what we want to talk about. And so that's what Doug and I have put together. And so I'll let Doug kind of take it here. And where do we even start with recognizing this, right? I think most people don't even realize a lot of times that they are wearing multiple hats. They just think this is just part of being a flooring installer or a tile installer, or what, if we're sticking to this flooring industry that I'm kind of in,
Sure.
that's the mindset. I'm just this. And then they think those things all go with being it. And they don't even realize to break it out. Is that what you is that what you find through your years of consulting, or is it a
Yeah.
different problem altogether?
No, I mean, it kind of creeps up on you, right? Because it's an evolution. You start doing some projects, you start making some money, you hire somebody to help out. You add a little bit of complexity, then maybe you add an office location, and before you know it, success will breed this complexity that comes along with it in areas that people didn't go into business for. Right? I've never
Mm-hmm.
met anybody that said, I went into business and I just found anything I could do just so that I could do payroll and learn about insurance. Right. Like no one's ever said that to me. And I don't expect anybody ever will, And so it becomes all the things, all the necessary evils to be able to generate business, to be able to stay in compliance, be able to pay our folks and manage money and all those things. And I think it's important for small businesses to recognize that every small business has almost all of the same departments that a large corporation has,
Mm-hmm.
right? Procurement, legal, and HR, and all these other things. But a lot of times they're boiled down to a little bit of time that the business owner can give to each one of those activities. Now, some of them we outsource, right? So most people will have an outside accountant. They maybe have an attorney if they've done stuff with leases or they've had some sort of legal issue or to write their documents.
Hmm.
They have an outside insurance person. Usually, marketing is split up over multiple people, right? So we have someone for web, someone for graphic design. That's a very fragmented piece of
Yes.
it. But all these different things are going on. Then we have the cadre of things that we have going on that we might just ignore, right? We might not have a hiring process or an employee handbook or those kinds of things that we really should, but we're not going to hire an outside HR company. We don't have that expertise. So we kind of do the best that we can do. And so whether it's to be able to facilitate the growth that a business owner needs, or to solve a problem that all of a sudden they now have in front of them, like I think a lot of people during COVID realized I need to know more about HR,
Hmm.
right? Because what do I do if someone says they will or they won't or they can or they can't or whatever? And it's like, I don't know those answers. And then a lot of times they'll ask a friend, and if that friend's in a different state, the answers are completely different, right?
Yes.
So we
Yes.
do a lot with like reaching out and getting ideas from other people. And I'm like, except HR. Like if someone's across the state line, the answer is almost always going to be different. So you start to piece all that together and then look at how much time those activities absorb, and they're significant.
Hmm.
Because to me, the best use of a business owner is to do the things that only they can do, not things that other folks can do. But in the beginning, a lot of business owners, and I've been guilty of this myself, think like I couldn't hand that off. Like I'm the only one that cares enough. I'm the only one that knows the backstory. They came to me because my name was on the door,
Hmm.
whatever it might be. The reality is, though, it is one of those things we just got to get over because it's not true. And one of my favorite stories or one of my favorite comparisons is Disney, right? When Disney started, Walt Disney he drew the designs. He was the whole business. He did the
Hmm.
television show himself, negotiated every agreement, and quickly realized that as successful as he was, he just couldn't keep doing that. And so, his brother stepped in and said, well, I'm going to do the financial part of it. And then it grew and grew, and they needed more and more resources. And now, if Walt Disney came back to life, he wouldn't be qualified to run his own company for a day. I mean, it's just outgrown tremendously.
Definitely.
But it doesn't have to get to that extent to be a really big burden on somebody's time. But then what people find is when they put the right folks in place or find the right resource and know how to manage that, then they are freed up to grow the business, to innovate, to come up with new
Hmm.
ideas. And the fact is, most business owners are surprised to find out that even though the customers came to them because they had a good reputation, the customers keep coming to them if their team delivers, whether or not they're dealing with them directly at
Yeah.
every step along the way,
Well, and
right?
there's some traps to this too that I don't know that a lot of people are realizing. And it was I was going out when I was running the business, I was going out and I was saying, "Hey, I'm the guy. I'm going to come out and I'm going to do the work and I'm the one that bids it. I'm the one that's going to install it. And if you have a problem, which you won't, but if you do, you have my phone number. You're going to get me on the phone and I'm going to solve it, right? That's why I'm more expensive. If you're looking for value, it's because you have direct access to me. You don't have to deal with all the shortcomings of a larger business that there's 15 people to go through and all of that. And it did help me sell. But at one point I did start trying to hire apprentices and expand, and I changed the language. It was the team's going to come and they're going
Mhm.
to, right? And so I think a lot of people get hung up on, well, everyone asked for me. So change the language, right? Stop talking about you, stop selling you, sell the team, sell the company, sell the idea, and you can get out of that very quickly and people don't balk at it. Another thing was just having worked for other companies. I think a lot of times people are afraid of new hires. I've probably told the story on here before, but I went and I worked for a guy and only for like a week or two, but I showed up and I was new and all my, my bucket was new and all the tools in it were brand spanking new, nice and shiny and all of that. And we're standing outside the door waiting for the client to come to the door. And he picks up dirt. He starts throwing it at my bucket. He's like, it can't look like you're new. And I was offended because he was messing up my stuff. And I was just like, this makes no sense. Like, you're just a dick and you don't know how to explain it, because I know that I've gone to plenty of businesses, especially like if I go to a restaurant, there's generally somebody that's getting trained and they're being shadowed by a more senior person. And that doesn't scare me. I don't think my order is going to get messed up or anything like that. And so what are you afraid of to show your client that you're trying to grow your company? Like just the mentality didn't make sense to me. And then the fact that he was messing up my tools is just like, all right, you are not somebody that I want to be employed by. But I think that mindset is out there a lot where we're afraid to admit that somebody's new. Like, what's the big deal? Like
Right.
why are we so hung up on it? And so how do you have something to like, what do you have for that of, does it really matter in the grand scheme of things? Or is that just easily explained away with a conversation to the client of, hey, they're new. I'm watching them. They're only doing tasks that I trust them with,
Yeah.
and we're done.
Well, I mean, you think about it, most growing companies, right, have to get good at hiring. They have to get good at training and employee retention, that whole HR side of things. But to me, it can send as positive a message. And I think you're exactly right. It's how you frame it to say, we have new talent coming into the organization. If everybody that's in an organization has been there for 25 years, it starts to make you wonder. I mean, certainly they're good at retention, they have experience, but you also have to wonder a little bit about, are they up on technology? Are they up on the latest techniques? I mean, I think
Mm-hmm.
every company you want to see a blend of that, a balance of that, right? But we like to talk a lot about systems, right? Because a good system says whether we put somebody that's new in that system or somebody that's got more experience, the system ought to create a certain consistent outcome,
Yeah.
or at least reasonably consistent. We have quality control in places. So we do a lot of work with process improvement, things like lean and streamlining processes. But one of the benefits of all that isn't just to do a process more quickly or, to cut costs. It's to say, no, we can get a consistent delivery every single time. Right. And so I used to always joke about the fact that, I have 6 kids, right? So when we would go to a fast food place, I had no hope that the order was going to come out completely correct. None whatsoever. My whole my whole hope was that if I took all 6 kids out, that there were 7 somethings in the bag, because if we were one short, I didn't have a sandwich. Right. But it was just like, we want to get something in there. We fast forward now and we look at an organization, and some people like it, the food, and don't. But like a Subway, right? Subway sandwiches, they'll make 1,000 different variations of a sandwich in a day and get every one to come out right. And part of it is because of the way they've structured their process.
Yeah.
Part of it is the interaction with the customer that says, no, 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 don't put black olives on that. That's not what I want. But they get to the end of the line and they've created a process where you can insert somebody into the line, because the first question is, what kind of bread do you want? And then it goes down the line. And if someone joins the line, if there's maybe a couple of customers and then a few more come in and someone comes out of the back, you don't hear a lot of conversation between them about, do you want to do meats or breads, or where are we on this, or how to,
Yep.
like, they slide into the spot and they slide the sandwich forward. And so one of the very first things, and one of the very first revelations for most people that feel like they have to do everything and struggle to delegate, is that they've not done a great job of identifying and document their processes, right?
Mm.
But now it's a good thing to do. And you mentioned succession planning, and I know that's a different topic, but when you do get to that point, if you have processes that are documented and people that can step in and execute them, your company's worth more than if you do everything yourself,
Yes.
right? Because someone's going to try to reproduce that. So I think that's the very first place to start, to say, of all the things we do, from the marketing we do all the way through the completion of a project and the accounting for that project, what are the things that we've kind of figured out how we do it? And is there a particular way to do it? And if we documented it, then it gets a lot easier to put someone in that slot to say, okay, once they choose their bread, you're going to know what to do right up until you hand it over to the person that's going to put the
Mm-hmm.
condiments on. Right. And I think that's always for me a very good starting point to say, like, of the things you're not comfortable with, how many of them do we even have a way of doing it?
Okay. I've learned that I forget who was I following. It came from Dean something who's with Dan Sullivan, but they ask who not how. And I think
Mhm.
a lot of times the problem is that we look for how to get something done, not who can get it done. And what I've realized is, like, the way I would equate it is, if we have to build out these systems, you're going to go hire an apprentice and you have to train them, but you don't have any documented training procedures.
Right.
Well, you're explaining it to the guy. He'll have better retention if he writes it down. So why not
Yeah.
make him take the notes of what you're telling him to do? You can then take those notes at the end of the day, bring them home, type them up, clarify them, make them more organized. The next time you have to go through it, you have a handout for the guy, right?
Hmm.
And so now you have a consistent training program that you've had help designing, so you didn't have to do all of the work. But I think that's kind of where we need to start. Is I didn't like bookkeeping, right? I knew like I can do it. I could get QuickBooks. I could figure it out,
Right.
but I didn't want to do it. So I went and found somebody to do it for me, and it cost a couple $100 a month. Saves me the time. I can go do bids or whatever, and I understand enough to hold them accountable. But that freed up my time. It would take me way longer to do my books, and I don't have an interest in it, right? So like, where can you find if you look for the who and not the how of how, like to get it done, you will start saving a lot of time and be more efficient.
Yeah, I mean, I think that a good hire brings a lot of talent into an organization. Like you said, they're going to go through a learning curve anyhow.
Hmm.
I get very, very concerned as soon as someone says, "Well, someone's following along, but yeah, they don't take notes, or I don't really know how much of it they're getting." And so for us, a big part of that is the onboarding process. We work so hard to find a good candidate. We work so hard to get them to come on board, make an offer. They choose your company, and we know it's one of the most important assets that we have. And then we bring them in, and the first couple of days are sort of like, well, here are the rules and regulations. There's the restroom. Here's, how we do certain things. And then after that, it's like, well, ride with Joe or ride with Harry. And, they kind of pick up some things along the way, as opposed to we really like to see folks when they come into an organization have an idea of like, okay, in 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days, these are some things we want you to know, and these are some things we want you to be able to do. And we start
Hmm.
we start with that list right off the bat, right? So in 30 days, you should know how to put in a schedule or order a such and such or measure a whatever, whatever those things are.
Yeah.
Then that helps the person that's training them to say, okay, well, Harry, the new guy's going to be riding with you, or the new gal's going to be riding with you for 30 days. At the end of this 30 days, these are things I want them to know and know how to do. Then you turn to that person, just like you said, and said, okay, you're going to document those things because at the end of this period of time, we're going to know if that's something that you're capable of doing or not. And, it's not a all or nothing. It's not like, okay, well, if we're not 100% there, we don't have the right hire. It's more that we're setting an expectation. But Kyle, I get to some people and they've gone through this hiring process and it's a big deal. And they get to the end in 90 days and I'm like, well, how's a new person doing? They're like, I mean, good, I guess. They seem to really be enjoying it and following along. And it's like, okay, you know nothing about them. They
Yeah.
didn't show up drunk and they didn't fall out of the truck. I mean, that's great, but it's not the whole ball game.
That is a low barrier to entry and huge success for a construction company. But I agree with you. Is that's having worked for some larger organizations when I was younger, right? And I was employed by Target. I was employed at UPS for a while, and that let me see a structure of how new hires should be handled. And when you look at small construction businesses, I found somebody that shows up and they do what I say when I tell them to do it. And like, if that's the bar, that's the problem. But exactly what you're talking about, having this, setting these goals and being able to tell somebody where they need to be and how they need to get there and giving them the tools is such a different approach that it leads to success, and no one's surprised when they get fired. I think one of the things I talk about a lot with the clients of my mastermind groups is,
Yeah.
what are you developing to be able to hold people accountable? What are you documenting when you have a conversation that, hey, you're struggling in this area, this is what we need to work on? Because I think a lot of times it's in small businesses, we just let things go and let things go and let things go, and then finally you get frustrated as the owner and you blow up and you're just like, you're fired. Well, the
Right,
person never
right.
saw it coming because you never addressed it. And that's a problem, right? If you would have gone and addressed it
Sure.
and put them on a 90-day plan and said, in 30 days, I need you here. In 60 days, I need you here. In 90 days, I need you here. And it was all documented, worked out, talked about, and you met at 30, 60, 90 days. At 90 days, if they're not cutting the mustard, then they're going to understand, I'm getting fired today. And
Yeah.
it's not a
Well, and the
surprise.
irony, Kyle, is that if you do that, and we have we have a really simple process, it's like 3 sheets, right? Because we know someone's not going to go out and create an onboarding, process the likes of which some of the larger companies will.
Hmm.
So keep it very simple. But the reality is, the funny part about it is that when people do that, they actually make it more likely that they don't get to 90 days and have to fire someone,
Correct.
right? I have some folks that will hire somebody and they love them, and then they start the job and then they like them, and then 60 to 90 days later, they're disappointed. And by 120 days, they hate them. And it's like, okay, when you go through that cycle repeatedly, that is not the person you're hiring. That's the process you've created,
Yes.
right? The other thing I've found is, and I've been in this situation myself, I've worked for some smaller companies earlier on in my career. And when I get there and they hired me to do something in particular that I'm excited about doing, and I get there and on day two, it seems like they don't have a plan for me, or they're disorganized, or it's very, very unstructured. To me, that makes me question whether or not I chose the right company. Like, how's this company going to drive my
Mm-hmm.
progression when on day three, we're looking for something for me to do? You know what I mean? And so to me, top performers respond to being challenged. That's what makes them top performers. And so we actually start to get the best out of people fairly early on when we make it a little more rigorous, I think. And so it's funny. You're exactly right. Makes it a lot easier if it doesn't work out, but ironically, it makes it actually more likely it does work out if we start working the process very early on, you know?
Yes. Well, and I think that's the key here is that a lot of people are, especially again, construction businesses, oh, the neighbor down the street just turned 18, graduated school, he doesn't have a plan. Hey man, come on, hop in the van, we're gonna go do this thing, right? Come roofing with me, come tiling with me, come do whatever, right? You're just kind of hiring willy-nilly. There is no actual process. And so
Yeah.
a lot of the stuff that I've gotten into is why don't you have core values? Why don't you have a hiring process? Why don't you have this structure put in place to where you're looking? And I get it, we don't have a lot of time, but again, like these things don't have to take a lot of time. And I think you would agree with this and have probably found it. Why reinvent the wheel? There's another company out there that already has a hiring process in place. Call them,
Yeah.
talk to them,
Sure.
ask them if you can borrow it. If they won't, call another one. There's probably a company in your area you respect. And like, I'd rather spend time tweaking something to my liking than sitting down thinking my company's so unique, because it's not, that I have to reinvent the wheel and develop something from the ground up. Like, what a waste of time. And that's, we don't have a lot of time. We're small business owners. I'm wearing 40 hats, man. If I have to do some marketing and I only get 30 minutes a week to figure out a marketing plan, that's what I have. So I better find a way to make that as efficient as possible. And I don't know that most people are out there looking for the shortcut and trying to steal something. They're like, oh, I gotta come up with it all.
Yeah.
Stop it.
No, no, you're exactly right. And there's so many great examples of stuff that's out there. And people will generally share that information. They're enthusiastic a lot of times.
Hmm.
I know when we identify something we think is done really, really well, I'll tell one of my clients, I'd like to put you in my best of, and I have this sort of folder for best of, hiring process or advertising for something or job description. And, always ask they're okay first.
Hmm.
But they're usually pretty enthusiastic about having, been designated that. And so it makes it a lot easier when I'm talking to somebody and say, okay, well, here's something you can use. Like, here's
Yeah.
and then that's where things like the onboarding process came from. Because, when you get back to the core of what we're talking about, right, being able to comfortably hand things off so you can get to the most important stuff, to me, it's like, it's like a college athletic program, right? If you're going to turn a team around or a college athletic program, why is it that certain schools can consistently turn out championship teams
Hmm.
or certain professional teams can, right? And a lot of it comes down to recruiting and then developing and then holding them accountable. And it's like you set a standard, you set a rigor, like you said, when you talk about your company values or there's a reason why people want to play for that team. It's what they stand for, it's the way they go about things. And so as soon as we start to identify that and say, okay, what is a win? And I love to do this whenever I go to meet with new companies or companies for the first time. I'll just simply go in and ask a couple questions of the whole team. Like, what is a win? for you? Like, well, how do we know when the company's winning? And what does that look like? And then what is your role in us being a winning team? And why is it even important to you? And when people recognize, like, no, no, I want the company to win because that's where my future growth comes from, or my next raise or bonus, or just even having job security, like it's important we win. And the ways that we win are to be able to take on more responsibility or to communicate better. These are all setting the stage for that business owner to be able to say, okay, I don't actually have to do everything myself. Because if my people know what a win is and they know what their role is in it, and we're hiring the right folks
Yeah.
and we're taking them through an onboarding process. Now, when I say, okay, I'm going to take myself out of the billing process or the sales process. And when I say out of it, I mean out of doing it, not out of making sure it gets done, right? I
Yes.
always felt like when I first hired a bookkeeper to handle the bookkeeping for the consulting company we started, I had way more control over my finances because I wasn't just trying to get the entries put in. I was actually analyzing what was coming out of the system and could look at it and go, okay, well, that can't be right. That looks too high. That looks too low. When I was putting everything in myself, I was just happy to get everything in at, the system. And so you don't
Yes.
spend the analytical time, right? But you look at it and say, okay, lots and lots of people can input data. Relatively few people can analyze that data and make business decisions about our company. And the business owner always has to be working towards their highest and best use. They know they owe that to the rest of the team. And so I think it's something that, and once they start down the path and they start to recognize it can be done, then that's a big eye opener. Now there are some folks that go way the other way, and those folks scare me a little bit too, right? They'll say like, I hate doing bookkeeping so much that the first person I find that can add, I'm going to hand off my bookkeeping. And in
Yeah.
the interview, I'm going to tell them I hate bookkeeping and I'm going to give them my bank account information and I'm going to tell them I hate bookkeeping so much I don't even look at this stuff,
Yeah.
right?
Good
And
call.
what you've really asked someone to like either have the most personal virtue they can have, or you've asked them to steal from you, right? And
Yes.
so at the end of the day, it's like there's a good way to get out of things and there's a not so good way of getting out of things. And I always tell people, you mentioned I like to tell stories, and I do because I think people remember the stories, right?
Hmm.
To me, the challenge of delegation is very similar to me with the experience of teaching one of your kids how to drive a car, right? I don't know if you've had that experience. You're a little bit younger than I
Almost.
am.
Almost.
Yeah, okay.
About a year to go.
Okay, so well, this will be good on a couple levels for you then, right? So I've taught multiple kids on how to drive a car. And the interesting thing is you start out by giving them instruction, you give them direction, right?
Hmm.
And then you take them to a parking lot and you actually let them, get behind the wheel and hit the gas and, you lunge forward and go through that whole experience. And at some point, after you go around and around and around in circles, you realize like, okay, we actually do have to go out on the road, right? And so you get to be really good at doing this like left-handed, I can still feel the wheel kind of deal. And then you're sort of also pretending you have pedals in front of you, which you don't. Um, and then you get on the road and realize, like, if they're going to be successful, you got to let them take the wheel.
Hmm.
And second of all, like you're going to give them all the direction you can, but at some point they've got to develop this skill, or you're going to drive them to wherever they have to go for the next 30 years. And I see this with business owners. It's like, I'm going to delegate this to you, but I'm keeping my hand firmly on the wheel. And
Yep.
it's like, well, okay. Or I'm going to let you do this, but I'll let you do it in the parking lot, not out on the highway. Right. And it's like, no, at some point, you got to get comfortable with, I'm going to give you direction. We're going to practice. I'm going to tell you, don't hit the telephone pole or go over the yellow line. Like, we're going to have some guidelines in place.
Hmm.
And yes, maybe a point where you're weaving a little too far and I may raise my voice and we'll all get over that. Right. But at the end of the day, if I can't successfully do this, then I'm locked into doing it forever myself. And I think when people realize that, it's like, okay, then it's got to be about how do we do it, not if we do.
Yeah, you got to
That
find a
makes
way
sense?
to, yes, you definitely have to find a way to let go. And I think that's where key performance indicators would come in, right? How do I track what you're doing? How do I hold you accountable to the standard I want you at? And again, like you said, it's not about having to let go of the task. It's about empowering them to be able to accomplish the task to the standard that you set and having the performance trackers in place to make sure they're doing it to the level you expect so that you can trust them and hold them accountable to it, which is
Yeah.
that's where we lack. It's like, oh, I have to let go and let them do it. Well, yeah, but you don't just let someone go set a shower for you without having some sort of system in place to check on them and make sure they're doing it right so that the waterproofing is in place and the tiles are level and properly have the proper coverage on them. There's all these other things that you have to work up to, but that's also part of the training process of when you're
Yeah.
bringing them on board and bringing them up to speed. All of this stuff is building blocks. And so I think it's overlooked and confusing and seems overwhelming, but I need to interrupt us for a minute before we continue to dig into this. We got a couple of
Sure.
words from some sponsors real quick.
Yeah.
Johns Manville, the rumors are true. GoBoard Pro is available and approved for steam showers. GoBoard Pro was developed with the pro contractor's ease of project workflow in mind. Panels sized at 48 by 64 inches will limit waste on your project. They'll require less seams, meaning less sealant is needed. And best of all, you can space those beautiful blue GoBoard fasteners out to 12 inches without requiring washers. Visit www.jm.com/GoBoard for all of the product details. And we would like to welcome Schluter Systems aboard. Schluter Systems is all about providing products and systems that ensure durable, functional, and beautiful tile installations. With an emphasis on education through their nationwide workshop programs for professionals, the goal of the company is to offer innovative solutions to the tile industry that solve common challenges faced by installers. Their product line includes over 6,000 items, including tile trims, uncoupling membranes, floor heating systems, waterproof building panels, shower systems, and thin-set mortars. For more information or to register for a workshop, visit schluter.com. That's SCHLUTER.com. I just got done with doing the Innovation 2 workshop. Always a good time hanging out with Schluter. You will get spoiled. They take great care of you. If you want to get out of town so that you know that you can focus on it, they'll put you up for the workshop. And if you're fortunate enough, they do have a business one called Mind Your Business. So if you can get the private invite to one of those going on, that is that goes right along with what we do here. They're doing business at a very basic level, getting you to know your numbers, pay attention to some things, start tracking how you're doing, how to divvy up your time, how to really put a bid together and be profitable. So go check them out again, schluter.com, and then they've got their little event section. You can see what they have going on nationwide. All right, Doug, looking at how we're handling this, we have to let go of stuff. We don't have to do it all. But again, I think there's a struggle within that. And one of the ways I like to put it is hire people to do the things you hate, because I know there's a bunch of stuff you probably hate in your business, and find a way to do the things you love. And you talked about being able to, as the owner, go do the things that you're good at and produce revenue and all of that. And so I think there's a misunderstanding in a lot of small business owners that it's my company. I have to be the one to run it. But I know that within like the artisan community that is construction, a lot of these guys don't want to be the guy to run the business. They want to be the one out in the field. Do they have to be the guy at the desk, or is that a hireable position?
Yeah, no, I mean they definitely don't need to be the person that does everything. Going back to that Disney example,
Mm-hmm.
right? Walt made all the big decisions, Roy made it happen. But there's a pretty clear indication that things like Disney World would have never come about if it hadn't been for Roy's skills above and beyond Walt's skills, right? And so when
Mm-hmm.
we look at that in our operations, sometimes you'll see somebody that brings somebody in that can be really, really good at just, making things work. I'm not a big fan of business partnerships. I think there's a lot of challenges with those.
Yes.
Sometimes when someone is really, really good at the craft and someone else is really, really good at the business, it can justify, that kind of a relationship. But there are a lot of folks, and it's funny because sometimes they've had experience not even in the same industry, but they're just really good at things like hiring and managing and using numbers and holding people accountable and those kinds of things
Hmm.
where they can be a great addition. And so, I think if someone looks at it and says, well, there's only certain things that I'd really like to be doing, there's almost always an operations manager or general manager, or they call them different things, position that can come into an organization that can really, really make things very strong for somebody that wants to be able to just focus on the things that they do. I had someone that was a ballet instructor a couple years ago that had ballet schools, and she'd been very successful in opening these schools up. And she said, Doug, you know what? My passion was teaching kids ballet, and I haven't taught a ballet class in like forever you
Yeah.
know and we found that the management stuff of what she did, the scheduling and the posting stuff on social media, I mean, it was not at all hard to find somebody to do that,
Hmm.
right? And so and even with all the tremendous success that they had with Microsoft, there was a point where Bill Gates said, I get into this because of the really cool aspects of developing software and innovation, and I don't get to do any of that at all anymore. And
Yep.
he put a CEO in place and put himself much more on the creative development side of things for the remainder really of his career. And so I think we got to look at it. Now you mentioned, sort of what am I good at and not. There's a well-recognized business book out there called Traction,
Yes.
and it talks about EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And whether you look at the whole thing, there's some really great tools in there. And there's one called Delegate and Elevate, right? And it's literally a sheet of paper that's split into four quadrants. And you list the tasks that you are great at and you love to do,
Hmm.
you're good at and you like to do, you're good at but you don't like to do, and then the fourth quadrant is things you're not good at and don't like to do. And it's like, okay, if you're not good at it and don't like to do it, that is the beginning of the list of somebody we should hire, right, to do those things,
Yes.
or we should delegate stuff to. The interesting thing about that is when you have people do it, and then we start with the owner and we'll usually work down through the organization to have other people do it, what you find is the least expensive and the easiest to replicate tasks are the things that bog down most business owners, and they're the easiest things to hand over.
Hmm.
you know so years ago when I owned our accounting and tax company, I spent it took as long back in the day to assemble a paper tax return as it did to actually do the tax return, right? And when you realize that like you could make all the decisions and get the tax return done, and somebody else could take it and print it and fold it and staple it and attach the documents, like that was at the time an $8 an hour person.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as an $8 an hour person anymore, but doing that job, but doing the tax return was a $50 an hour person,
Yes.
right? And so every time I could take that hour and say, okay, you can do those things, I could do two more tax returns. I'm spending $24 and I'm generating 300, right? And it's like that's the math where it says, okay, I've got to get those things handed over. They're
Hmm.
also the things that generally have to happen, right? Someone has to answer the phone. Someone has to send out the payroll. And so what happens is not only do you lose the time in doing those things, but you lose the flexibility of saying, well, I can't take 2 weeks off because who would do payroll, right? I can never take a 2 week vacation in my
Yeah.
whole life, right? Because someone's got to do payroll, right? And, my wife's running an organization. She's actually out of town at a conference today and having a great time. And yesterday, when she was packing, said, I got to bring my laptop because I'm the only one that can do payroll. And I'm like, oh, well, I tell a little story about that, but now I'll just tell your story, right? So, I mean, it happens all the time. But at the end of
Yes.
the day, when you start to tilt the scale the other way, and you're like, well, wait a minute now, I've got more time, I've got more creative time. The dollars I'm making here offset the dollars I'm spending there.
Hmm.
I'm actually giving the folks that are working for me more opportunity to show what they can do. It is a very positive path to take an organization down, but it's tough because what usually happens is as soon as I hire somebody and it puts a little financial stress on my situation, and then I give them something to do and it doesn't go right, my immediate reaction is I've got to take that back. I'll never do that again.
Yes.
Right. And, to me, that's the person that says, okay, I'm going to be driving with my kids in this parking lot until they're 45, and I'm going to be driving them like, you know, to work every day because I just, every time something looked a little edgy, I took it back.
Yeah, you're willing to let them stay in the parking lot and correct the wheel, but you're never really letting them out where they can get in the accident and truly cost you money. And I think that's the pitfall, is that if you're not willing to lose on the investment, then how are you doing it? I think one of the best stories I heard is somebody cost the company, like $2 million, and they were like, "Wait, you didn't fire the guy?" And he was like, "No, that's the best $2 million lesson I can ever teach him."
Right? We
Because
got
I
a lot
know he's never
invested in
going to
that
do it
person now.
again. Right. Yeah. Now we're invested in him. I can't let
Yeah.
him go and let him
Right.
go do better at another company. And,
Right.
and
Right.
that's what I see is a lot of, the apprentice screws up and does something wrong, and they dent the fridge, or they do something stupid, and you're like, oh, I got to get rid of him. Why?
Yeah. No,
Like, they're not
it's
going to
interesting.
screw up anymore. Right. Like, let them have the mistake, make it the lesson, and they'll if you're hiring correctly, if you've developed a hiring process to vet people,
Mhm.
they're probably going to learn from it. And that's the cost of doing business, right? That's the cost of having employees, but it should long term save you time as long as you let the lesson develop. If you constantly protect them, if you jump in, you pull the wheel back. I've talked about it before. You can have the apprentice, you can keep pushing the apprentice out of the way for the 5 minute task. Nah, just let me do it. Nah, just let me do it.
Yeah.
But if you're doing that 5 times a day, 6 times a day, right, there's 25, 30 minutes a day that you're doing this 5 minute task. So if it would have taken you 2 hours to teach him to do it properly on the first day, by the end of the week, you've already bought that time back. What's that time going to do for you moving forward? Now you save 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, the rest of the year. There's 40 weeks at 30 minutes. You've got 20 hours to be focused on doing a higher level task. And that's what I
Absolutely.
think, that's where a lot of people are missing this, is it's like, no, it's easier. It's my company. I have to protect it. You don't,
Yeah.
but you have to let the mistakes happen.
Well, Kyle, I worked with someone a couple years ago, and they had grown into about a 10, $12 million company. They started as a painting company, then went
Okay.
into remodeling, did some other things, right? And when I said to him, like, why have you been so successful? Like every piece of the business was successful, and they had about four different areas. Each one had someone on the team that was basically going to take over as the owner of that piece of the business. I mean, they'd done a
Mm-hmm.
really. I said, where'd all this come from? He said, I realized really, really early on that I needed to hire people that had the right work ethic and that shared my values. Then I realized that I needed to let them make mistakes. I needed to insulate my customers from those mistakes. So that's where we had to sort of draw the line to say, okay, what can we do to make sure that if something goes wrong, the customer is insulated? And then he said we would actually budget mistakes into like our budget for training dollars. Like we know it's going to cost
Okay.
us a couple $1,000s a year to train somebody. We also know they're probably going to account for ten to $15,000 of screw ups, and we know that, so we put it in the budget. And at the end of the day, they didn't freak out every time something didn't go right. But what they did do was recognize that once it started to affect the customer, hey, we got to write a check to insulate that. We can't let that
Mm-hmm.
become part of our problem or part of our reputation. The other thing I see people do a lot, though, is they'll move someone along and they'll start down the path of delegating and they truly believe in it, but they'll do a lot of, hey, Kyle, I'm going to let you write this proposal, but before you do, let me see it, right? And that continues and continues and continues.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is Kyle gets good at doing 80% of his job because he knows Doug will do the last 20%.
Yeah.
Right. And so we've got to have that point also of saying, yes, we're going to do that for a period of time. There will be a point though when something goes out the door that I haven't seen, and that's going to be okay because we're going to get them there first, right? Otherwise, you end up with a lot of work. I call it the boomerang effect. It's like, I give it to you, it comes flying back at me, right?
Yep.
So you wrote six proposals today. That's great. And we used to see this in the tax business a lot, right? We'd give someone a tax return and say, oh, let me review it before it goes out. At some point you find that it takes longer to review somebody doing a tax return than to do it, right? And so it's really
Yeah.
hard to not resist that temptation. But you got to get to the point eventually where you say, okay, I understand something's going to go out the door and we have our quality measures in place and someone's going to make a mistake, but that's how we're going to get to the next plateau, you know?
Yeah, you gotta let it happen. I actually, that's funny you bring that up. I've had that discussion with my bookkeeper. She's bringing some people on board. She's like, I have to review everything they do, and I was like, for how long? She's like, forever. And I was like, no, you don't. I was like, just teach them to do it right, and
Right.
trust them to do it. Like if they screw it up, it could be fixed later. Well, yeah, but I can't charge people for the time that I have to. I was like, why can't you charge for them to fix it? Like, that's not, it's like you're missing the point here, right? Build it into the price in the first place, knowing they're probably going to screw it up. Like you said, right? There was a budget for accounting for this stuff. And I think that comes down to, it's talked about on the show all the time, knowing your numbers. If I budget in the screw up and then it doesn't happen, well, cool. We're way more profitable. That works out for everyone. But then I don't have to figure it out when something goes sideways and the client's mad, right? I can just being able to throw money at your problems. It's such an easier place to come from instead of worrying about, okay, I know a problem's going to happen, but I don't know how to cover it.
Right.
Just find a way to build it in and protect yourself. One of the last things I want to hit on here is again, kind of going back to the owner, and they always think they need to end up in the office, and I think they do for a time, right? You start growing and you need to find a way to build yourself out of the field. Like if you're
Yeah.
truly passionate about the installation side and that's where you want to be, and you don't want to sit behind the desk, I do think you have to get out of the field, but that doesn't mean you can't end up back in the field. You have to find a way to build yourself out of the field to put yourself back in the field. And I don't know that that's how it's looked at a lot of times, is that it's like, well, if I leave, I can't ever go back and I just want to stay and play. And well, you're hurting yourself because you're not trusting the team to in the field to do what they need to do. You probably need to be able to focus on developing some systems and processes to better run the office as you expand, better run the field as you expand. But if you properly build all of that stuff, then you should be able to go. I think your ultimate goal as a business owner should be, I want to go play where I want to play when I want to
Mhm.
play. Like that's
Yeah.
a much better way to run a company of, I like, let me go do the thing that interests me at the moment, and everyone else is managing it, right? If I need to leave for a 2 week vacation, I can leave for 2 weeks. Everything should run hopefully better, right? Like I would hope that I've built something so good that when I'm
Yeah.
around, I'm getting in their way, and they're like, no, 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 like move,
Right.
dude, you're slowing us down, right? It runs better without you than with you. And then you can just go focus on the things that are broken, and looking for the solutions. Or you can go play in the field as the artisan and say, there's this really cool project coming along and there's this really cool inlay that needs to take place. Like, I want to do it. I haven't installed for the whole year yet, and I just want to go play with my guys on the tools. But
Sure.
everything will
Well,
keep
Kyle,
going.
one of the important things that comes out of that, you use the word apprenticeship a couple times. Most of what gets learned in the world of construction gets learned by people physically being able to do it and work around people that know things and they learn from them and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
That also tends to give way when the owner gets bogged down with administrative processes, right? Not only are they not spending time in the field, so they're not happy, but they're not spending time in the field and doing that mentorship that they should be doing with that next generation. So what I find is when they start delegating things that they don't need to be doing, put that structure in place, a lot of times what their passion brings them back to, and like I said, whether it's in
Hmm.
construction or a great restaurant or whatever what bring their passion brings them back to, usually puts them in an environment where they're developing other people to develop those skills as well.
Yeah.
And they become a much more likely to be successful company in the future because they're back in the field teaching someone their skill set in terms of, how to do a project that we don't do all the time or,
Hmm.
those kinds of things. And it keeps their creative juices flowing, right? It's like to me, when I get to consult, when I'm knee deep in a company and really looking at problems that, are not that easy to see or whatever it is, that's when I feel like I'm at my highest and best, but it's also what I love to do. But when I also get to take one of my other consultants and work that process with them,
Hmm.
it's like, okay, this is so much better because not only am I getting to do the things I love to do, but I'm creating a capacity for something that really can't be as easily handed off without actually doing it and learning it. But a big key is to get out of the things that you don't have to be doing because they are learnable. They are systems that you can put in
Yeah.
place or, those kinds of things. And the other thing is not everybody that you lean on, and we should know this from construction anyhow, but not everybody you lean on has to be a W-2 employee that works under your corporate umbrella. There are virtual
Yes.
assistants, there are marketing companies. There's a lot of resource out there that can say, listen, if I'm not good at this and I don't have that right person on staff that I feel comfortable delegating it to, sometimes it's very cost effective to say, we're going to take this slice of the business and that's just going to be outsourced.
Yep.
And it's funny, a lot of times, especially like in the wood flooring world and other contractors, we understand that concept because we are the recipients of that kind of work, and yet we miss the opportunity to then turn around and say, right, like certainly someone could do this because it's what they do, right? Why is it that you should be giving me your wood flooring projects? Because I understand, what materials should go into it. I understand humidity. I understand all these different things,
Hmm.
right? And then we turn around and try to do our books ourselves. It's like, well, guess what? For all those things about why, we don't want to use that product or the heat levels and all these other things, there's
Hmm.
someone else that knows those things about social media and
Yeah.
marketing.
But
And
but I
you know what I
can't
mean?
trust anyone else because I'm the only
Right,
guy. It's my company. I have to do it. No one else is going to do it as well as I. I mean, I know all the excuses, but that's
right,
exactly the point. Is there are people, but go vet them. Go find the ones. Go have the conversation. Do the interview. And like, I look at one of the first things I think any business owner should hand off is they're probably not unless you're actually the a bookkeeper and you like numbers and you're running a bookkeeping business, you probably shouldn't do your own books. And it's one of the easiest things to hand off. But if the person that you're handing it off to isn't willing to teach you how to read a P&L and how to read the balance sheet and what those things mean and how you need to keep track of your receipts and why you should be doing time studies on how long tasks take you so that they can help you better figure out your numbers, you probably don't have a great person selected for that role. And so you need to
right,
go vet somebody that's going to help you expand. As long as you're paying them the money, they should help you improve the business. Not like just being able to input the stuff does not make you a bookkeeper. I can
right.
train my 12-year-old daughter to do that. Like she can just punch in numbers. But who's going to help you analyze them? Like I need an expert to do that. And so if you can find the right person and actually delegate it out and they're willing to teach you about it, right? Find the marketing person that's teaching you how to market. Find the virtual assistant that you can help that will help you develop a system for them to be successful answering your phone and scheduling appointments for you to go bid. Like there's so many things that you can hire out, but you have to get over being afraid of not having your hand on it, right? But who's going to help you let go? And I think that's where the hang up becomes, is that no one's looking for the person that can actually help them let go. They think no one can ever do it because they'll never do it as well as me because they don't have the knowledge. And when you're not working with somebody in that capacity, they're never going to have it because you didn't ask them to
Yeah.
develop it.
Well, no, it's true. And when we do a lot of like 5-year planning and things like that, growth planning. And one of the things that we always tell people, as simple as it sounds, is the key to growth is balancing and managing time, people, and money, right? Those are the only resources we really have.
Okay.
And so when you look at like how do we get the finances to work, how do we staff properly, and then time, and time being the owner's time or the leadership team's time, we will run out of time before we run out of people and money, right? That is the constraint that really becomes the
Mm.
biggest thing. And so when we start with an organization, we always start with like, okay, tell me how you make money. Like, what is it that you do to make money? Do you install wood flooring? Do you cut hair? Do you fix cars? What is the revenue generating activity? Now, with that aside, how much time do you spend focused on that? And then how much time do you spend on administrative, HR, marketing,
Hmm.
or bookkeeping or accounting, right? And as soon as we have a path for those other things, we find that we can focus much more on the revenue generating activity. That's a little bit more challenging to hand off, but even that needs to be handed off, right? But it's like by taking a very methodical approach to say, okay, tell me how we're going to balance, like I said, your time, because we'll run out of that at some point, and then how we can leverage these other areas so we get more time spent on the revenue generating types of
Hmm.
activities, developing skill there. It gives us a path. It's always funny very early on because we'll work with somebody for 6 months to a year a lot of times, and but by about month two, and they're like, well, wait a minute now. Now that I did that, I have some more time to do the thing I told you I couldn't do. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, no, no. The very first thing I'm going to focus on is freeing up your time because everything else I need you to do, you can't do until you do that.
Yes. Which is,
Right.
no, it makes sense, right? We have to find a way to free up the time so that we have the time to do the things we actually need to do. And so
Mhm.
where does that start? Like, what's the first easiest thing you can get rid of? But it also goes to, you as a business owner need to be tracking what's happening in your company. And I don't know that a lot
Yeah.
of people are, right? They don't even know where they're spending their time. They don't know if it's 2 hours a week on estimates or 10 hours a week on estimates.
No,
where
that's
where
true.
where are you at, right? How often, like how much drive time are you putting in? Is there, I think one of the things that I did was I tried to maximize my drive time by making sure that I was getting in a phone call, right? I have to get from point A to point B. It's going to take me 30 minutes. Can I call a client during that time and set up an appointment? Can I take that? Can I return that inquiry and get a consultation scheduled? Or
Yeah.
can I call the bookkeeper and have the discussion about the books that I need to have to work through the process that I have to, right? Because I'm getting to my next thing that needs to be done, but I filled that time with something else so that I'm not having to do it later at night. And my day goes on and on and on. And now I'm at a 16, 18-hour day and I just want to go to bed and I have to repeat it tomorrow and get beat down for 16 to 18 hours. Like, I don't want that life.
All right.
And so
Well, and the other thing, Gal, is I think right now, two people need to realize, and it's probably a subject for a whole nother discussion,
mhm,
but you know, there is a lot of technology that can help this process along, right? When you were talking about training and writing things down and building that methodology,
yeah,
5, 6 years ago, it wasn't as easy for people to take pictures of everything and upload them or videos and those kinds of things. And when we
yes,
get to like time tracking now, right, there are some really great apps that can be, even geocoded to say like when you hit a job site, we know you're at the job site, right? There's just lots of little things along the way that can say like technology can actually also make it easier for us to even understand what's going on before we start making decisions about what we should do more of or less of.
yep. Well, and it again, I think that the pushback is going to be, well, that costs money. I don't have it. Look at the big picture, right?
Yeah.
Again, if you're going to invest the money, what's it going to save you? Because you can sit there and have the guys write down everything they have to do every 5 minutes, right? I switch to this task, I switch to this task, I switch
Yeah.
to this task. Well, if somebody's out driving around and it can be set up on geofencing, so it's automatically logging like, okay, they drove over to the box store, then they drove over to the supplier, then they went and hit this job site, and it's just marking it for them. Well, now they're not having to take their phone out of the pocket, stop, change what task they're doing. So it gets them to be more productive. And then what is that actually costing you, right? You sign somebody up and it's $30 a month. Are they spending $30 worth of time just having to be on the phone or the iPad or whatever, tracking all of it? And so
Well,
the
and you
cost
see this
becomes a
though,
wash.
right? Exactly, because they're just spending it different ways,
Mm-hmm.
right? When people tell me they can't afford to have somebody order materials or have someone run materials to a job site, but they can have their three most expensive project managers in line at Home Depot at 8 o'clock in the morning. It's like, okay, you understand how much payroll we got tied up at the most important part of the day. Because I believe, if we get the day started right, everything else goes much better,
Yes.
right? And you're telling me, and you start looking at the cost of setting up a system where that stuff can be ordered and drop shipped or whatever it is. And it's like it pales in comparison to the 72 trips we're making to Home Depot over the course of a month and the cost of the payroll we have standing in line in the morning. And so sometimes you really got to kind of measure some of those things and then hit people with that reality. And when they get it, it's like, oh, yeah, well, and then, my favorite is, well, not only do we have that person in line, but to save money, they're riding in the same truck. So now I got two people sitting in Home
Mm-hmm.
Depot, one in line and one in the parking lot while we're not doing anything.
Oh,
And it's like,
yeah. I got a great example of it. Actually, I was having my dad's house rewired this past week, and the owner of the electrical company, he kept going out on supply runs, and I was like, well, that's interesting because there is the new guy that's far cheaper, and he could do that, and you could probably get more work done. Well, he was out doing those supply runs, but I noticed that he kept buying like small runs of wire, and they were making supply runs every day. And I was like, hey man, did you like, why you keep buying the small roll of wire? And he was like, well, because sometimes I got to run like 3 different wires, and so I can run 3 different rolls. And I was like, yeah, but why not just go buy like the 1,000-foot spool and
Right.
save money? Well, because sometimes I got to run like 60 feet, and then I got to run another 60 feet, another 60 feet, and I don't know exactly. I was like, so go buy like one of the wire measuring things and run it through and pull 60 feet, pull 60 feet, pull 60 feet, throw it all up there, run it, but you still saved money. Well, I can't, I don't have the space in my truck. And I was like, yeah, but you would only make one run every week and you'd get more done on the job site. I was like, you're
Yeah.
wasting so much time going back. And like it didn't click for him, right? But I was just like, wow, man, there's a lot of inefficiency here. Like you could have been done a day earlier, you could have saved money and been more profitable. And it
Right.
just kind of blew my mind looking at it. And I think that's just it's little things are missed sometimes on how much they actually add up. It doesn't seem like a lot to drive to the store once a day for 30 minutes, but is it 30 minutes or is it actually an hour and 15 because of the drive time, the downtime, waiting in line? You're buying smaller quantities. Like,
Yeah.
study it, look at it, right? And how do you free that up so that you can again have more time to focus on the tasks that matter, that can move you forward? Like, stop being scared of finding time to actually focus on the 30,000-foot view, because if you keep, especially as flooring installers, we get this 12-inch view of our
Right. Right.
projects,
Yeah.
and that then translates to our business, and you're not accomplishing anything at 12 inches away. You got to step back and at least look at the room, get like 10 feet away, and focus
Right.
on the
Right.
room.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. Yeah.
Let's see. I want to be respectful of your time. I appreciate it. I'm sure we could go for hours and hours and just continue this, and maybe we have you back on. I think there's plenty of value for you to add. But is there anything that we didn't hit on that you'd like to throw out there real quick?
Yeah, I think probably just the biggest thing that I hope people take out of it is to get to where you want to be, you've got to go through this process of handing things off, delegating effectively, developing the team, and B, these things always look overwhelming until you get a game plan in place and just start to take them step at a time. It doesn't have to be all or nothing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And take small steps along the way. Free up an hour. When someone gives me a calendar and says, I don't have time to do the things you're talking about, free up 1 hour, right? But what would be the easiest way to free it up? What are we going to do with that hour?
Mm-hmm.
Now we get it to 2 hours a week. And when people tell me that, I always say, like, if I was going to give you a free hour of consulting, aside from the consulting we're doing right now, you'd take it. And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, all right, then pretend I am and use that hour. Like, use that hour for something productive,
Yeah.
right? And so, it's just a lot of, and I see this with business owners on lots of different topics. If we can't get all the way there, we don't get any of the way there. And just, I would say
Mm-hmm.
that, you've shared some really, really good insights, and people should realize that small incremental progress over the course of a couple years in a business can fundamentally change a
Yeah.
business. We
That's
look at improvements to pricing or profit margins, or we look for small steps. But when they start to multiply, it's like, wow, we're in a completely different place.
Yep.
And that takes a little bit of the philosophical edge off of this place can't get by without me. Well, you can probably get it by with a few less things being done by you.
For
So that's
sure.
where I would start. Yeah.
Totally agree. I push for 15 minutes. Can you
Yeah.
find 15 minutes a day to step back and look at that 10-foot view, that 30,000-foot view, right? And if it's 15 minutes a day, it's going to add up over a week, a month, a year, 2 years down the road. You won't recognize your business because you actually put the time into changing it instead of just working in it. And
Yeah.
that's going to be the difference. I love it. I think that just finding a way to be productive, to be able to find a way to hand things off and work slowly at it. I guess my takeaway is going to be, if you can't trust somebody to do the task, then you designed it improperly.
Yeah.
If you can't hand off a task and trust someone to get it done, then you either have the wrong person picked because you did a very poor job of vetting them in the first place, or you designed the process that they have to follow incorrectly. So
Right.
go step back and look at it and figure it out, right? Is it the wrong person, or is it the task designed improperly? And that should allow you to really start stepping back and freeing up your time, right? I see it all the time. I can't trust them to install. They're going to cut corners without me. Why are they cutting corners, right? That should go back to the values that you have for your company. Oh, you don't have any. Well, let's set those up. Now let's hire on those values. And now let's build a training program built around those and the processes you hold dear to be quality control. And we should have a different outcome. Stop just hiring the dude that shows up. Hire the person that actually, meets what you expect the outcome to be. And then you should be able to let go. It's not easy. It's hard. It's supposed to be hard.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely.
If it was easy, everybody would do it, folks. It's supposed to be
Exactly
hard,
right.
but it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be hard that you want to quit and hate your life and you hate running a business. It can still be
Yeah.
fun.
Right. Or it can't be so hard that you just don't do it, because then some business owners do a really, really great job of creating for themselves the worst job description in the company. And it's like, well, if you're going to own the company,
Yeah,
maybe you should have the best job description.
I would hope so. That's the goal
Yeah.
here. That's what we want to get you to.
Yep.
All right, Doug, where can people find you? How do they reach out if they have any questions or if they want to check out growth team strategies?
Sure. Growth teams, they can go to www.growthteams.com. They can reach out directly to me at doug.howard@growthteams.com. Those are probably the two easiest ways. We also do a lot on LinkedIn and Facebook, and people should look to follow us there. We like to share a lot of content and a lot of the things that we're doing. But yeah, we love talking to folks about their businesses.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Let's see. What do we got here? Visit FloorAcademyPod.com. Check out the shop. Pick up a t-shirt, hoodie. If there's something else you want that you don't see on there, I think there's like a mug and some magnets. We got all kinds of different swag. But if there's something you want a Floor Academy logo on that's not there, I can check out what the drop shipping company has and see if I can add it. There was a couple of bikinis made at one point. So that's a thing. They're not currently available, but there's, if you wanted a pair of socks, I think there's socks, there's backpacks. Like if there's something you want that, so you can support the show, I'd appreciate it. I can see what I can do about it. You can also help support the show at patreon.com/Floor Academy. Even $5 a month goes a long way. There's a link in the show notes to make that easier. You can click on it, take you right over there. Again, make sure you like, subscribe, leaving a review. It will not only help get you more content like this from other creators, but it will help grow this community so that within the community you have more people to interact with, and it helps me reach more people. So it's, there's lots of reasons to do this. You can join the Facebook group where we have great business discussions. Just search Floor Academy on Facebook. And thank you again to all of the sponsors. We got one last word from Tice. Stay connected, continue discovering, learn more, and network. Now available, you will want to access the International Surfaces Event new resource library. Flip through the digital pages of the Tice resource books to source products, take tailored journeys through Tice event offerings, or watch, rewind, and share Tice recorded content from the event. Available now online at intlsurfaceevent.com, or click on the link in the show notes. You'll even see this podcast featured inside the Tice 2024 textbook, offering select recordings from this year's amazing event in Las Vegas. Don't forget to get the dates for next year. Book them out, schedule it, attend. It's a great way to meet new people and find out different ways of improving your business and keep a thumb or a finger on what is happening in the industry and where it is headed. All right, folks, that's going to do it. Thank you again, Doug, for joining us and sharing your thoughts, input, how people can kind of go about finding a way to free up their time little bit by little bit and actually do it successfully instead of being overwhelmed by it. I truly appreciate it. And everybody,
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it was great.
You're welcome. We will catch you all next week. Don't forget to learn while you earn.